Definitely could use some this fall, but it's the reality of it. And we'll take a look at when we may get some a little later.
All right, sounds good, Joe. And let's start off with our top story of the day. Election Day is just 19 days away, and Michigan voters are already casting ballots with absentee ballots. And today, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel sent out a letter to local law enforcement, just going over some different policies and practices that her department says need to be in place. So here's Mark Shillette with that full story.
There is value in understanding what is and what isn't legal activity on Election Day, and I hope this letter serves as a resource not just for our officers, but for our citizens alike.
14 pages. That's how long the letter is that Attorney General Dana Nessel sent to law enforcement agencies all across the state.
Now, this guidance is critical to keep us all on the same page, preserve the rights of Michiganders in every community, and to maintain a safe environment at every voting location across the state.
This year's guidance letter, a little longer than those in the past, because this year there are new laws on the books intended to keep our elections secure and our voters and poll workers safe.
This year's letter highlights long-standing Michigan election laws, as well as guidance on the many new laws that took effect in 2024 to make voting even more convenient than ever. And it's up to law enforcement, from my office to our state police, to sheriff's departments and local agencies in every community, to preserve public safety and to help ensure a secure, legal voting environment this November.
The letter serves as a reminder to law enforcement what is and isn't allowed when it comes to our elections, and also what scenarios they're likely to encounter.
It's our hope that this letter will help your local police departments to be aware of critical election statutes, how to assess violations, and how to resolve any number of possible incidents on Election Day and throughout the vote counting period.
The letter and guidance intended for law enforcement, but the Attorney General quick to point out the effort has to go beyond just them.
It's the responsibility of our citizens to not engage in unlawful behavior, the responsibility of dedicated and trained poll workers to promptly report allegations of illegal activity, and the support of our law enforcement community to be prepared to respond.
New laws explained, older ones reminded of, and an expression of the expectations of everyone who takes part in our upcoming election.
Trust that from the most local levels of government all the way up to the state, public officials and law enforcement agencies are working together to protect our elections and our voters on Election Day and in the weeks leading up to it. And this endeavor requires much of all of us.
And for more on this story, we're going to bring in our reporter and anchor, Mark Shillette. Hey, Mark, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Maya?
I'm doing good. Long time no see. It's been a whole, 10 minutes? So with this story, what motivated the Attorney General to send out this letter to law enforcement?
Well, this is a letter, a similar guidance letter, if you will, that the Attorney General has sent out with elections in the past. I think a lot of this stemmed from 2020, and obviously there were a lot of concerns raised about safety and security and election integrity and everything like that. And so I think some rules kind of changed there. And then also there have been changes in Michigan election law with the early voting, in-person voting, the absentee ballots voting. And so when you change the law, I think the Attorney General probably thought it was prudent to remind law enforcement that this is the change in law. If you read through election law, actually, if you read through any law, there's a lot of nuance in law. It can be very hard to interpret what exactly is the law. And it's probably even more so with something like election laws, where that's not necessarily in law enforcement's day-to-day routine of knowing what the laws are, how they work, and what's an exception and what's not to be allowed. So I think the guidance letter is just that. It's guidance. And if you look at it, this was a lengthy document. This was 14 pages long. It included all the new laws that are in place for law enforcement, and it also included the old standards of where are protesters allowed, who's allowed to bring in a cell phone or a firearm to a voting place, and what are the standard rules and what has changed this year. So I think that because there were changes, and because this is going to be a very closely watched election. I think the Attorney General probably felt it was prudent to let law enforcement know about that with this kind of very detailed explainer of a guidance letter.
And can you go into a little more detail about these new laws that are in place for 2024?
Well, you know that, like, for example, with the early absentee voter, there's also a lot of new things on the books when it comes to voter intimidation and poll worker intimidation. That these kinds of things will not be tolerated, and shouldn't be tolerated. So those are some of the kind of newer things. But it's also very hard for someone as a poll worker or a law enforcement worker who they're very well trained, they're very qualified, they know the rules, but to also interpret in that setting where you have one day to get it right. You have election day, or in-person voting day, 8, 9, 10 days. You don't have an unlimited amount of time to decide, is something criminal happening? Does it go to the prosecutor's office for review? Does it go to trial, pre-trial? Like, you have one day to make sure that this vote counts and this vote matters. So you don't want to take away that right from somebody, to make it so that their vote doesn't count, or make their vote count if it shouldn't count. So the pressure's on. You have to get this right the first time. So with the new laws, I think that was the purpose behind the motivation.
And if any law enforcement members have any sort of questions or confusion about these new laws, what can they do to get answers?
Well, if anybody has, if law enforcement has a question, included in this letter was the fact that the Attorney General has set up a resource telephone line, like a hotline for a law enforcement officer to call and be like, we're dealing with this situation. Here are the nuts and bolts. Is this violating the law? Do we have to move forward with this or not? So it's kind of like a helpline where it will be staffed by folks who know the law, including prosecutors, so that law enforcement who may have a question, may not be quite certain, is this right or is this wrong? They can call that number and get an answer right away. Because again, time matters. This is an election. It's not something that can be settled in the courts. It's something that somebody in particular action, they need an answer right now and then. Does this violate Michigan's law when it comes to whatever aspect of the election it is? This letter was intended for law enforcement, but the Attorney General today, in the explainer that she did for the media, said that this letter can also be shared with voters. It's important for voters to know what is not allowed and what is allowed and what to expect. So this was intended as a legal guidance for law enforcement, but it's probably not bad for everyone to go through and read this letter and know what the law is, to not only know that you're not violating the law, but if you see something, a protest that's within a certain number of feet of a polling place, or if somebody approaches you and says something they shouldn't approach or questions you, it's important for all of us to know what the rules are so that not only is your vote protected, but also if you see something that is not right, you know that you can go report that to someone.
Sure. All right, Mark, thank you so much for joining us to go into a little more detail about your story. Now let's turn things over to our question of the day related to this topic. Are you worried about election security at the polls? So far, we have 404 votes. If you haven't voted yet, you can scan that QR code on your screen right now. That'll take you to a webpage where you can vote yes or no. As of right now, 58% say no and 42% say yes, but we will continue to keep an eye on those results as the show goes on. Let's turn things over to another story that we've been working on for a while now. So this is just an update to the Ironman Triathlon in potentially Frankfurt. So it's been held in Frankfurt in Benzie County 4 times, and the idea of it being held again in 2025 is still kind of up in the air. The Frankfurt City Council was supposed to meet this week to potentially make a decision on it. They did not make any decision. They actually kind of tabled it, and they said that they will hold a special meeting next Tuesday to make a decision. So our Allie Baxter reports on why a decision hasn't been made yet.
The reality is all arrows are pointing back to Frankfurt.
For the last 4 years, Michigan's Ironman Triathlon has called Frankfurt and Benzie County home. But as we first reported in June, the organization was looking to make a move back to Traverse City. You and I were standing in this exact position a few months ago talking about Ironman not coming back to Frankfurt potentially for the next few years. When did you guys have an idea that, well, maybe they aren't going to make a move anymore, they want to stay here?
Well, we got notification from Ironman the Thursday before the week of the event.
Frankfort City Superintendent Josh Mills says he wasn't surprised to hear from Ironman. He says logistically, the Benzie County course has worked well.
We did take a hard look at Traverse City with a variety of different partners, and it just didn't feel like it made a whole lot of sense right now. But the reality is we've got a really, really good product in Frankfort right now, and trying to rebuild something with so many unknowns, that's a little bit scary.
The city council didn't want to rush another 2-year commitment to the event without asking for the community's input first. After the public hearing, a council member commented at Tuesday's meeting.
The cat's out of the bag. Ironman wants to go back to Traverse City, and Traverse City is playing hardball with them, and they have said, we want money for our, if you're going to come in and profit, a couple $1 million, where's our piece of the pie?
This had nothing to do with investment levels. I think, a good investment's a good investment. I mean, I think investing in an event in Traverse City of this magnitude makes as much sense as investing in that same thing in Frankfort. We have an opportunity here to do something very special, regardless of what city or county it ends up in.
Mills says Frankfort hasn't really come out and asked for money before, and that the city is compensated for any of the overhead costs by Ironman.
Ironman is going to provide an updated host venue agreement that's going to include an additional $2,000 that the city would be allowed to put towards any endeavor they desire. It's mainly geared towards a placemaking initiative, like whether it's our Lighthouse Fund or maybe even some of the other things that we do in our community with our parks and the trailway systems that we have.
And Ironman did give Frankfort a deadline for when they need a decision. They want to open up registration by Tuesday. So they're hoping to have a decision by Tuesday. That's when that special meeting will be held in Frankfort, and we will keep you updated on any decision made. All right, one last story before we take a quick break. Deer hunting season is underway in Michigan. Archery season began earlier this month, and one of our meteorologists, Trevor Robideau, spoke with the DNR to talk about things that hunters need to know this season.
Archery deer season began on October 1st and runs through the 1st of January. Open firearm season doesn't start for another few weeks, but hunters who choose to try their skills may see more deer than the last few years due to a mild winter.
We did have a pretty mild winter last year and a pretty good mast crop as well. And so deer went into the winter last year in pretty good condition. And so they came out of it in pretty good condition as well. And so this year, we would expect to see maybe in some areas where there have been higher deer numbers, you'll see those higher numbers still. And then even in areas where there have been fewer deer, we might expect to see those numbers increase.
Some local butchers are already getting deer in processing.
We've had quite a few in, probably about 20 so far. It really depends on the weather. The weather has a lot to do with whether people are seeing them, not seeing them kind of thing too, obviously. It seems like the last few years it's been warm this time of year, unusually warmer than normal. So the deer aren't really, moving as much, or they're just not seeing the deer.
With the new season comes a few new regulation changes.
The muzzleloader season is now open to any legal firearm. And then the second is the early and late antlerless seasons are now open on public land, not just private land. So they've opened that up.
Beyond that, it is still a requirement to report your harvest in Michigan. You can do so using the DNR Hunt Fish app.
That you can download on your smartphone. It's really handy to be able to submit your mandatory harvest reporting for any deer that you harvest. We also have our hunter digests are available on the Hunt app, but we do have mandatory harvest reporting.
The DNR reminds us to be safe and use best hunting practices out in the field. In northern Michigan, Trevor Robideau, UpNorthLive News.
We're going to take a quick break, but Joe will have more on the weather forecast coming up.
I'm Jada Johnson from Big Boys TV, and the Fish and Game Report is sponsored by Johnson's Propane.
Well, it was another nice sunny fall day here in northern Michigan, and let's look ahead to the weekend because it's going to be a nice one, right, Joe?
Here or in Minneapolis?
Both.
That's where Maya's going to be. Yeah. You know why, the Lions game. She's a true fan, aren't you?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, both spots look pretty nice for the weekend. Warm and dry, we'll kind of dive into that in a minute. By the way, right now, for the next hour or so after sunset here, if you head outside, you could see a comet. If you look in the southwest sky, Paul sent this in. So Paul's an area astronomer. This was taken in Lakes of the North. This was taken last night of the comet, which I mentioned in our 6 o'clock news on NBC. The next time it returns is going to be in 80,000 years from now. And there's another view of it. Sammy took this in Antrim County, and you can see the tail there off that comet. Maybe you want to head out and check it out. It's completely clear. I mean, here's a look at right now, Whitefish Point, Drummond Island, Petoskey, Traverse City. Look around northern Michigan. The sun just going down there at Traverse City. Remember when sunset was 9:30 back in the day? And again, with the time change coming up in a few weeks, it'll be even a lot earlier, but that's a look right now on a nice evening out there. Temperatures, a lot of 50s. There's still a few 60s. Traverse City hanging on right now. These are the current temperatures at 64. Pellston and Gaylord both at 62. Grayling, Alpena also still in the 60s. We've turned our wind out of the southwest for the most part, and that's helping to warm things up. We have a big area of high pressure near Cincinnati tonight, and there's nothing anywhere even close to us. There's a system offshore in the Atlantic, and then another frontal boundary out west. There's even a little snow in the Rockies tonight on the colder side of that frontal boundary, but we're not going to get that anytime soon. And here's a look at our satellite and radar imagery right now as of 6:50, and you can tell it's dry out there. Stormcast, future radar and satellite, yeah, not much to show you. Repeat tomorrow. It's going to be another nice day, maybe a couple degrees warmer. And there we head into Saturday. Now, there is a front north of us. Watch Saturday evening after dark. Might get a shower or two in the UP. That's about it, though. Sunday and then into Monday, we're back to pretty nice weather. And there is the weekend forecast. I mean, outside of that chance late for a shower or two, it looks pretty good for Saturday and Sunday. And there's our extended forecast. Dry and warm through Tuesday. I think that's the theme here. Nice weekend, though. The weather will be fantastic for the weekend. And then a front comes in Wednesday. That's the next chance, for maybe some widespread showers. I don't think we're going to get a lot of rain. And then late next week, we drop back down into the 50s.
All right, thanks, Joe. We're going to take another quick break, but we'll have sports in just a few minutes.
The following segment is sponsored by Jimmy John's of Traverse City.
Week 8, we still got some interesting factors at play here, and these teams are playing for playoff points and positioning, which is, an important part of the month of November if they want to make deep runs. An intriguing rivalry, Brendan, the last few years has been Frankfort and East Jordan. Now, it looks like Glen Lake's got that Legacy Division title sealed up, but that doesn't mean we can't expect a good matchup between two playoff teams in the Panthers and the Red Devils.
Those two teams put on an instant classic last year, 38-36, with East Jordan come out on top in another Week 8 matchup. Frankfurt's won 5 in a row. Red Devils seem to have gotten their groove back with 2 wins in a row after they dropped 2 straight. I think here, again, you're going to see the offense from both of these teams. Who can get the key defensive stop, who can play a clean game. That's what's going to be what lifts one team over the other.
Another playoff team that is going to get a good test this weekend from an out-of-area school, that'd be Boyne City hosting Oscoda. The Owls, one of the best teams in the Leaders Division of the NMFC. So Boyne City can't sleep on the Owls a week before they host St. Francis.
Yeah, Oscoda is an interesting team because they started off 0-2, and now they've rattled off 5 straight wins. Boyne has won 3 in a row. So one of these team streaks is going to come to the end. The Ramblers have allowed just 25 points in their 3 wins. So they're going to lean on their defense to cool off those Owls.
Marquee matchup in Week 9 that we have to wait a week for is, of course, that Patriot game between TC Central and TC West. The Trojans and Titans both still holding out for playoff hopes, but to do that, I think they're going to have to win out, and that includes each of them winning against the Bay City schools this weekend. West playing Bay City Western, and Traverse City Central playing Bay City Central.
Yeah, I feel like the Titans are firmly back in the playoff hunt right now after breaking that 3-game losing streak. The win last week against Mount Pleasant was really impressive, 30-13 against a good Oilers team. As far as Central goes, they need a win here. They need a win against Bay City Central. They've got to win the battle of the Centrals. The last 4 weeks have been loss, win for the Trojans. They want to break that pattern. A win in Week 8 will be huge for both of them as the Patriot game approaches.
All right, we are going to take another break, but we'll be back in a few minutes and we'll take a look at the question of the day and the updated live results. Stay with us.
Salon services are furnished by Epiphany Advanced Academy in East Acme.
Today's question of the day is, are you worried about election security at the polls? If you haven't voted yet, scan that QR code on your screen right now. But as of right now, 58% of people say no, whereas 42% say yes. And in case you missed the beginning of the show where we showed Mark's story, Attorney General Dana Nessel sent out a letter to law enforcement all across the state with just the policies and practices that should be in place with the upcoming election. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us tonight on Up North Live Unscripted. We hope to see you back here at 11 o'clock. Oh. A little behind the scenes.